Hi there. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever it is and wherever you are in the world. My name is Rich Leimsider. I am very proud to be the director of the AI for Nonprofits Sprint at the Fund for the City of New York, where we have the privilege of working with more than 100 nonprofit organizations and their 50,000 staff to help everyday nonprofit workers become literate in the basics of using cheap, off the shelf AI tools to serve the mission of those organizations. Today, I'm happy to talk to you about some of the most frequently asked questions that I get when we do our trainings, webinars, and conversations with nonprofit staff across the country. Today, we're going to talk about the most commonly heard concerns about using AI in our world. At this point, we have shared surveys about AI use and gotten responses from more than 2,000 nonprofit workers in every department, every functional area working on every issue imaginable, mostly in the United States. And there are 7 issues that come up time and time again. And so today we're going to talk about those 7 concerns with using AI. But we're going to talk about it in the context of using AI incrementally, which is the way we present our work with artificial intelligence. So I'm going to share some slides and we're going to have that conversation. Okay, in the incremental context, there are a few different batches of concerns that come up. And the first batch is one that I would consider the most immediate short-term series of concerns. And these are the big three errors, or what some people in technology call hallucinations. Does AI even get things right? Will it be giving us mistakes when we ask it to do work with us? Bias. Does AI, in fact, come preloaded with all kinds of gender, racial stereotypes, other sort of biases that will really negatively impact the work that we do? And issues around data privacy. Can we trust it when we put our confidential information about our organizations, potentially about vulnerable populations, about products that we own? Can we trust the data that we put into AI systems? And so let's take those one at a time. The first and most important thing that we say at the AI Sprint is we strongly advocate what we call an incremental approach to working with artificial intelligence. And so what that means is we actually suggest that nonprofit organizations and individual workers start to the greatest extent possible by taking most of these issues off the table. We recommend that most organizations have really strong policies against putting any confidential private information about vulnerable populations, certainly into any off-the-shelf AI tools. To start with, until you have had a robust IT team, maybe even a conversation with a legal director, the policy should be no private information, no social security numbers of colleagues, no information about home addresses of immigrants that we serve or specific healthcare backgrounds. PHI, PII are the terms of art for those sorts of confidential information. There are lots of folks who are excited about bigger picture opportunities, what we call exponential uses of AI. Could AI make recommendations about where folks ought to look in terms of, which children in a foster care program need extra help? Should AI be making recommendations to judges about sentencing? These are things that do raise very significant concerns. There is some demonstrated evidence that there is bias of many different kinds built into AI, frankly, because AI was trained on humanity and humanity has all kinds of bias in it. And so the way we start is around errors, bias, and data privacy. We say and we suggest that nonprofit organizations can actually engage in AI in a pretty extensive way. There are lots of ways you can use artificial intelligence, and you can look at many of the other videos in this library for examples that really just keep these issues off the table. When it comes to errors and hallucinations, start with things where you are readily able to double check. When I use AI to write a different version of my own bio based on my resume, I don't have to worry too much about it spitting out errors. I can double check its work pretty readily. And then the other thing I would say about data privacy is all of the mainstream AI tools, ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, Gemini, make the privacy settings very easy to find. There's a clear button. For many of the free versions of the tools, you have to go find the button that asks it to keep all your data private. And usually when you're paying for one of the versions, the assumption is that you want all data private, so you don't even have to go find the button. Uh, Even in the context of understanding incremental I do have to say that when thinking about whether we trust the companies to do what they say they're going to do with our data, uh, I generally approach that the way I think about what they're doing with all of our data in general. So on the one hand, I think it's perfectly reasonable to have concerns about whether any of our online data is safe. There are breaches, there are hacks all across the internet all the time. On the other hand, Microsoft, Google, many of these companies have made pretty significant commitments to keeping our data safe and private in many other contexts. And so, for example, if someone asks me how concerned am I about putting confidential information into Microsoft's Copilot, their AI tool, I do say it's hard for me to understand why I would be more concerned about putting information into Copilot than I already was about uploading confidential information to Microsoft SharePoint or sending it via Microsoft's Outlook. Same thing with Google's Gmail or Google Drive. The fact of the matter is, we actually put all kinds of confidential, sensitive data into the cloud with these exact same corporations all the time. And so when it does come down to it, if the same companies are promising us the same level of security and data protection that we have accepted in our use in other places, it seems pretty reasonable to take that same level of acceptance here. Now, if you're dealing with very sensitive and secure information and you don't put it into any sort of Google shared drive or SharePoint shared drive, if you would never email something because you don't trust the way the internet and the cloud works, then I think in this case too, it's perfectly reasonable to keep those things out of AI. A second batch of concerns we hear in our conversations and in our online surveys is what I would sort of think of as the midterm, middle level concerns. Uh, I sometimes hear, particularly from senior people in organizations, will using AI result in an over-reliance on a tool? Will people stop learning how to write code? Will they stop learning how to write a paragraph? Will they lose their skills? Now, obviously, you have to believe that AI has some skill at doing these things. When it comes to thinking about over-reliance and loss of skills, I think we ought to take this in the context of balancing our missions, our workforce, against issues of professional development and equity. So, on the one hand, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there have been new tools developed for decades that did mean a loss of skills. I am sure accountants are much less capable of adding up long columns of numbers using pencils or even calculators ever since the invention of the spreadsheet, right? And we don't really claim that that was the destruction of the skill of accounting and finance. On the other hand, if professional development is one of the reasons why you would want a junior staff person to write a memo from scratch, write a grant application from scratch, if you're already doing the kinds of things like telling a new fundraising associate they can't use an old example of a grant proposal when they're writing a new one, they actually have to start it from a blank page, then you might also want to prohibit the use of AI in writing those proposals. I tend to think that the opportunity to use these new skills is also going to really support our goals of bringing a much larger group of people into the workplace. So when we have colleagues who have great understanding of the issues that we're working on, of the communities that we're working with, and those colleagues now have the opportunity to write memos, to write computer code if that's part of their job, to analyze spreadsheets of surveys at a much higher level than they otherwise would have, it opens up new career possibilities for them, and it gives us the opportunity to work with those colleagues in a new way. When it comes to job displacement, I think that is very real. I think people do need to expect and understand that as AI becomes capable of doing more and more things that humans have done, there is going to be some change in the world of work. If I was working at an outsourced private sector call center in a foreign country right now, I would be quite concerned about the ability of some of these AI tools to come take my job. When it comes to the nonprofit sector, I have a slightly different perspective. My feeling is that we have the opportunity to talk to our colleagues. I've never met a nonprofit leader who felt that they had too many resources, or even that they had enough resources for the mission that they've identified. And so for us, I think it's up to us as nonprofit leaders. I think it's up to us as staff to initiate these conversations. The opportunity at a nonprofit, at a social purpose organization, is to say, we explicitly declare that additional resources that come to us because we are now going to be using AI in a different way, we are going to allocate those resources, those efficiencies, those abilities to do new things to expanding our impact. And so if working with AI means taking on an additional 50 clients to your legal services organization, I think we want our leadership to declare that that's the focus. The focus is not on cutting jobs. The focus is on getting more done when we were already overwhelmed with the amount of work we had to do. And frankly, we're now in a time where those concerns are even greater. And then finally, we have a group of concerns. These are the last two of the big seven that we hear most frequently. And again, I should say, when we've run these thousands of surveys with nonprofit staff, about 50% of staff say they have no concerns about using AI at all. And the other 50% typically share one of these seven with a pretty wide variety of level of concern. Some say, well, it's not a big deal, but I am thinking about XYZ. And others say, I am extremely concerned about this one particular issue or a couple of issues in the world. We definitely hear the concern about the idea that AI might develop over time into sophisticated science fiction level entities that will cause problems for humanity. These are real things that serious people are having conversations about. Uh, I don't have much to say on that topic, on the robots taking over the world topic. I understand that there really is no evidence that any of the AI tools that have come out over the past couple of years are really making any progress towards an AI that can do its own thing, do what it wants, run counter to a set of human goals. And at the same time, I also don't know how much that has to do with whether or not we use AI to write a grant proposal or to check an email or to role play a job scenario with a colleague. Environmental impact is also something I hear about quite a lot, and I want to walk through that in a little bit of a more a detailed conversation. It is absolutely true that generative AI, the kinds of AI that are most popular lately, use a lot of computers. Training these new AI models and using the AI models requires data centers, these gigantic, computing systems as big as an entire large warehouse that are just filled with computers, thinking all the time. That takes electricity. It actually takes water to cool those organizations. And there was an estimate early on after the release of ChatGPT, which got a lot of our conversation started, that one ChatGPT query in 2023 took, according to this estimate, 10 times the amount of electricity as a Google search. So that's something worth thinking about, worth understanding. It's also been estimated that data centers take about 4% of electricity in the United States right now. And that's growing. And, it's possible that could be double or triple the amount of electricity that these data centers consume in the United States. And so this is not trivial. It's something we ought to really understand and think about. But I think context really is also of fundamental importance here as well. And so while on the one hand, we can understand the amount of electricity use that ChatGPT might use compared to Google, we should also think about other things in our life that consume electricity. It also seems to be true that streaming a video for an hour uses 100 times as much electricity as ChatGPT. It happens to be true in the United States, at least, that electricity production is only about 1/4 of the causes of greenhouse gas emissions or of carbon emissions. So when you say that data centers are consuming 4% of electricity, when only a fraction of data centers are actually AI related, and that electricity is only about 1/4 of the carbon emissions in our country, you add it all up. And that means that right now, AI is probably contributing something on the order of 0.5% of the amount of carbon emissions in the United States. That's not nothing. That's not trivial. That's certainly a lot more than me leaving the lights on at home. But at the same time, in context, it just helps one understand where that sits. And I will say that all the evidence has been that the newest AI models seem to be using significantly less electricity than the original ones. And that typically has been the experience with most technologies over time. Electricity does cost money. And so over time, technologies tend to use less and less. I can't say for sure that any of these trends will continue. I think thinking about all of them, maintaining conversations over time makes a lot of good sense. But from the perspective of our AI for Nonprofits sprint, this is how we understand and come to think about these 7 legitimate, thoughtful concerns about using generative AI in our organizations. Thanks so much. Feel free to learn more about the AI for Nonprofits sprint and hope to see you again on another video soon.